Critic. I read it, you listen. Guess what, guys? Today's fanfic can actually be read in its entirety. Wow, you guys are actually clapping? Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's much better than doing, I will admit. Thank you. Thanks. Are you guys done yet? Thank you! Now we can actually get on with the review. I will admit, though, I never thought I would be so happy by the fact that I can actually read a fanfic in its entirety. So let's find out what this fanfic's about. It's a Mortal Kombat fanfic called The Final Battle. The author is Universal Lizard. They've written 3 stories. It's rated T, it's in English, it's adventure, it's Sub-Zero, it has 1 review, and it's complete. Yeah, and the word count for this is over 5,000 words. Let's hope it's a good fanfic. Sub-Zero never did think that this day would come, but wrong he was. As clearly told by Johnny Cage, Shinnok had brought together every single enemy combatant imaginable from his and his allies' memory into one spot, the massive Endernian crater, all fixed upon gaining some godly power. With the information from him and the forced rallying of their own warriors like Katana and Kenshi, now Sub-Zero and all the other heroes. Look at how they spell heroes. This is why we use Microsoft Word and other word editing programs to prevent little typos like this. Let's continue. Of combat were all united in one spot, and with their intent on stopping this threat. Looking around, he could see many familiar faces: Sonya Blade, Fusion, and Bo Ray Cho. Forgive me if I'm mangling the names. I know that some people are kind of nitpicky about that. Even his ally Serena had returned to him. She had told him that during her disappearance, she had been under the corrupted spell once again of Quan Chi. She also informed him of a strange warrior in some dragon armor that helped free her from it in combat. Okay, I know the whole gimmick for Mortal Kombat is to spell combat with a K, but when they use the word normally, can't they just spell it with a C? Maybe I'm just being nitpicky. Let's continue. Sub-Zero was glad that Serena was back and would have to thank the person responsible for freeing her. But now would not be the time. Up ahead, the heroes... they spelled it wrong again! Unless this is how heroes is spelled in another language. But I highly doubt that, so let's continue. Could see the massive black line on the horizon in the crater. Sub-Zero saw this and began to freeze the water vapor around his hand, then froze the ice into the shape of a sword. A tinge of reassuring confidence flowed through him as he gripped the frigid blade. Hold on a sec. Isn't Sub-Zero supposed to be a villain?
What's up, FanFic Critic? It's Writrzblok, and I'm going to tell you about Sub-Zero, who is one of the most popular characters in the Mortal Kombat series.
Hello, Writrzblok?
Sub-Zero is a member of the Lin Kuei Assassin's clan. He has the power of cryomancy, which means he can control and produce ice. He gained these abilities from his father, who was himself a cryomancer. There's actually 2 Sub-Zeros in the Mortal Kombat series. The first being Bi-Han, who was in the first Mortal Kombat game, and Kuai Long, who was in the subsequent games when Bi-Han was killed. As far as whether or not Sub-Zero is a good guy or not, you would have to go by which Sub-Zero you're talking about. While I don't know much about Bi-Han's personality since he only lasted 1 game and then turned into the undead wraith Noob Sabat, it's said that the younger Sub-Zero, Kuai Long, actually became more of an honorable warrior. Someone who wasn't just, an assassin for hire. He had a code of ethics. Kuai Long actually did take on more heroic characteristics as the series went on. However, in Mortal Kombat, the 2011 reboot of the franchise, Kuai-Long was actually transformed into a cybernetic version of Sub-Zero, whereas in the original continuity it was Sub-Zero's friend Smoke who was turned into a cybernetic assassin for the Lin Kuei.
And that's basically everything I know about Sub-Zero in a nutshell.
Ah, that explains a lot. Thanks, Writrzblok.
Hey, it was my pleasure to do this for you. Well, I'll see you next season.
Huh, I wonder what he meant by that. Season 10's not for a while. Not until, like, episode 181 anyway, and that's not going to be airing until, like, June, most likely. Whatever, let's move on with the fanfic. Then the command was given, and all broke into a run towards the advancing line of enemy warriors. This was it. This was where they would prevail over evil, or die trying. Sub-Zero gripped his Kori blade tighter, and searched for the most immediate threat in the line ahead. As they drew closer to the massive enemies, Sub-Zero identified a certain adversary in the other line, a warrior with a long spear, with flags sticking up from his back, Hotaru. He thought. It was soon clear to Sub-Zero that the Seiden had his gaze fixed on the outworld warrior, Mei Li, who was in the direct front of their attack wave. The two armies kept charging, drawing even closer to each other. They were getting closer, closer, closer. Okay, I added that third one. Then both met. I think they should say they both met. That would make more sense. They both met in a clash of steel and extremities. Sorry, my bad. Sub-Zero watched as Hotaru claimed his first victim by plunging his spear into Mei Li's midsection. She uttered a painful cry when the spear impaled her, and another one when Hotaru kicked her off the end. The feeling of being ripped off something sharp, combined with the unceremonious fall to the ground, Sub-Zero doubted Li Mei could have survived the encounter. Hotaru hardly had a second to savor the ill-gotten victory when he saw Sub-Zero approaching him. Sub-Zero brought his Kori blade down. Hotaru parried with his spear, and their weapons were knocked loose from each other's grips and fell to the ground. Both knowing their alternatives, Hotaru assumed Pai-Guya stance, and Sub-Zero assumed Shotokan stance. And yeah, I'm probably mangling everything, so don't say anything. I will admit, though, this is heating up, so let's continue. Hotaru pressed the attack by striking furiously to keep Sub-Zero on his heels. Hotaru kept the distance between himself and Sub-Zero close, so that the Lin Kuei warrior wouldn't be able to unleash an ice attack. Sub-Zero was left to content with Hotaru's slow but power-filled attacks. More than once he tried to fall back, attempting to give himself room to unleash an ice attack. But Hotaru always closed the gap and did not allow Sub-Zero an inch of space. Suddenly, Hotaru sent a viper palm towards Sub-Zero's heart. Sub-Zero sidestepped to avoid it, but instantly Hotaru changed direction of the attack and judo chopped the palm towards his throat. Sub-Zero ducked just in time, reached down and grabbed his Kori blade and slashed at Hotaru's exposed midsection. The point of the ice sword ripped through the Seiden's armor and bit through about a centimeter of the flesh beneath. Hotaru fell to the ground as his blood poured from his belly. Looking up one last time, he watched as Sub-Zero stabbed his blade into the wound and blood spurted out his mouth. In other words, he's probably going to die. "Curse you," Hotaru uttered. And now he's going to be dead. Then laid still. It should say, and then laid still. Proper grammar. Let's continue. Sub-Zero took no time to savor his victory. He yanked his sword out of Hotaru's stomach and looked for another foe to fight. No sooner had he turned than he found Quan Chi charging him with dual broadsword swords in hand. Not the least bit intimidated, Sub-Zero hefted his own sword and braced for impact. But Sub-Zero's surprise... Look at how they spelled surprised. Yeah, Let's move on. Quan Chi then came at him with a rising star kick that knocked him back. He was up again in a second and immediately blocked a strike that would have sliced his head off. He then tried to counter with a strike of his own, but the sorcerer merely parried with one sword and slashed with another. Had Sub-Zero not stepped back a few mere inches, he shouldn't have the word back in there twice because that's kind of repetitive, his whole leg would have been taken off. Again, the Cryomancer tried to attack, but Quan Chi blocked with one sword and then knocked the Kori blade out of his hands with the other. Sub-Zero saw his chance and kicked him in the chin, causing him to drop his swords in a backflip while collecting massive green energy in his hands. Sub-Zero saw Quan Chi launch the Dark Skull and launched an ice ball to counter it. Sadly, the Dark Skull obliterated the ice ball on contact and continued its path towards the Lin Kuei warrior. Sub-Zero flew backwards to the ground in agony. He witnessed Quan Chi pick up a fallen broadsword and approach him. Quan Chi raised his broadsword for the finisher and turned his head suddenly. Something trailing a reddish, get rid of the word A please, in color sailed down towards Quan Chi. To Sub-Zero it appeared to be a fist as it made contact with the sorcerer. Quan Chi was knocked back a few feet as his attacker came into clear view to Sub-Zero. "Scorpion," Sub-Zero spoke. The ninja Spectre nodded and helped Sub-Zero to his feet. I thought that Scorpion was his enemy. Well, maybe that was for the bad Sub-Zero. Whatever. We face a common enemy now. Okay, I guess they were supposed to be enemies, but now they're good. Now they're friends, I guess. Scorpion spoke. "Destroying him will avenge my family and clan." Scorpion and Sub-Zero ran towards awaiting Quan Chi and unleashed a teamwork assault upon the sorcerer. Even Quan Chi himself seemed to be pushed to fend off the assault of two skilled warriors. A few times the sorcerer attempted his rising star kick, but to no avail. Suddenly Sub-Zero got an idea. Scorpion at this point had felt a sudden surge to end the battle right there and fully occupy Quan Chi. The sorcerer suddenly let loose a roundhouse kick that would have taken Scorpion's head off had he not ducked. Scorpion saw his chance and unleashed a flaming backflip into the sorcerer. Quan Chi's fate was sealed as he stumbled back into an ice pike that the Cryomancer had created. The sorcerer's blood ran down the ice spike and created a red glow to it. Quan Chi let out a deathly cry as he tried to move, but he never got his chance as Scorpion shot his spear into his head. Scorpion tugged once, twice, and the sorcerer's head exploded from the body. Lovely visual. Sub-Zero felt self-elation as the sight of the death for such a long-time foe as he assumed Scorpion had. Suddenly, an enormous tremor shook the crater, shattering the pike into pieces, or the spike, to be more appropriate, my bad. Quan Chi's corpse fell to the ground a bloody mess, I should say in a bloody mess, and had what looked like a large clear red circle in his midsection. Sub-Zero looked around to see who was attacking and was amazed to see what appeared to be a giant pyramid structure breaking its way through the ground upward. The warriors ceased their fighting to turn and stare at the structure. Its full height had to be at least 100 feet high. As they looked on, they could see a slightly spinning circular frame at the very top. That must be what the evil warriors came here for, Sub-Zero thought to himself. Suddenly, Sub-Zero saw Stryker from Earthrealm break up the silence by punching Melina in order to get a head start up the stairs. But sadly, Stryker had only made it to the first level before Shao Kahn, I know that one from watching Mortal Kombat, the Conqueror, jumped up beside him, uppercut him back somewhere into the crater. Following those actions, the combatants surged forward, while some stayed behind and locked themselves into continuous combat with each other. Sub-Zero and Scorpion raced after the Emperor. They both tore up the stairs as Shao Kahn, who was knocking down anyone foolish enough to challenge him with his hammer. By now he had reached the 3rd level of the pyramid when he was knocked down to his right by an unknown force. The force became known as a figure trailing with fire. The face could still not be identified as Shao Kahn regained his feet and charged the intruder. But the figure was ready and popped his elbow forward. Sub-Zero knew that any mortal's uppercut would be ineffective against the Emperor, yet Shao Kahn himself had been popped into the air. The figure leaped into the air in pursuit and grabbed Shao Kahn. The motion of the figure was enough to send them both over the side of the pyramid. Suddenly, as quick as this information was processed, the 4 shuriken projectiles shot past Scorpion and buried themselves into the stairs in front of them. A second later, they vanished in puffs of familiar black smoke in the order they hit the stone. Sub-Zero and Scorpion turned around quickly to face a familiar-looking Wraith and cyborg companion. Noob Saibot stood before them, dressed in the traditional garb of a brother of Shadow. His eyes shone with dim and empty light. To his left stood the transparent gray cyborg Smoke. Yeah, that last sentence was a fragment. Change it, please. Thank you. He too stared at the 2 warriors with the dead, 2 soulless orbital sensors. He spoke first, breaking the silence. Surprised to see me again? You're the one who killed me. Why is your highlighted? Shouldn't it make more sense italicizing it? Let's continue. Scorpion declared, drawing his Wraith's attention to the Wraith's attention to him. Noob simply stared back at the Spectre, taking in what he saw and showing no signs of being intimidated. And that foolish ninja Spectre, Noob Saibot replied, intimidation dripping from his words. True, my mortal form was weak enough for you to defeat me, but what makes you think you have a chance against a Wraith? Scorpion was filled with rage at his comment, as Sub-Zero could tell. At the motioning of Noob, Smoke both leapt at them, but Sub-Zero was already moving. While he occupied Smoke, Scorpion leapt forward towards the Wraith. Sub-Zero deflected a strike from Smoke, and then slammed a fist into the metal chest that sent him reeling back. The cyborg suddenly swept Sub-Zero's feet from under him. Then take after Sub-Zero's feet from beneath him right after that. The Lin-Q warrior then came crashing to the ground, and suddenly rolled to his left as Smoke thrust his fist downward in a brutal punch that mini-cratered the brick. The Lin-Q warrior Grandmaster came out of his roll and was on his feet. He continued to block the metal fist crashing against his forearms and sending tremors up his arms. Smoke just kept pressing the assault by attacking too fast for Sub-Zero to get a strike of his own in. Just then Smoke folded his arms and fell straight backwards. There was no sound of impact, for Smoke had vanished into a black cloud beneath where he had landed. Sub-Zero instantly recognized this attack, but was too late to react when he felt a fist connect itself with his back. Sub-Zero staggered forward and was facing his foe again. He rushed at Smoke by sliding forward on ice towards the cyborg's now unguarded stomach with his shoulder, and Smoke fell flat to the ground. Seizing his chance, Sub-Zero leapt on top of the cyborg and froze the wires that supplied power to his mechanical brain. The cyborg went limp at once, and Sub-Zero turned around. Sub-Zero watched as Scorpion and Noob Saibot battled on. Megai Ryo versus Trollhammer. Okay. Noob would swing, Scorpion would evade, Scorpion would swing, Noob would evade. Just then, Sub-Zero noticed Noob snap his fingers silently, and only known to him and Noob, a cloud of black and circular formed behind the Spectre. Then Noob took another head swing at Scorpion, and to Sub-Zero's horror, Scorpion stepped back right into the black cloud where he just fell. Sub-Zero then saw Noob jump up with a trail of transparent blackness trailing him and sailed upwards towards Scorpion, who was coming down fast. Being experienced against such a move, Sub-Zero was not surprised with what was to happen upon contact. Noob bent his back to pull Scorpion over him, straight into the ground. Scorpion uttered a grunt of pain as he fell and tried to get to his feet unsuccessfully. The Wraith then turned to Sub-Zero. The blueness in his eyes were like daggers. "Finally, your end is near," Noob hissed. Both adversaries ran full tilt at each other. The Wraith cocked his fist back to make the first strike. At the last second, just as Noob drove his fist forward, Sub-Zero popped his arm up into defense, feeling a twinge of satisfaction sparking in his gut as he saw Noob's arm go no further than it needed to. With the block forceful enough to throw him off balance, he stumbled, and Sub-Zero quickly swept his legs in back of him that caused Noob to crash to the ground. His enemy recovered quickly, though, answering with a blindingly fast high kick that went flying towards his head. Sub-Zero tried to deflect it, but wasn't quick enough, and Noob's foot crashed into his chest. Sub-Zero grunted in pain as his chest bone is 2 words, not 1, felt the impact. Natural instincts kicking in, he ducked as Noob threw another punch and sent a midsection punch to the Wraith. Sub-Zero then tried to end it quickly with a brutal-looking knife chop, but Noob's arm shot up just in time to catch the arm and pull it over his body. Sub-Zero crashed to the ground, but had enough time to roll to his feet. Noob then raised his hand up for his own brutal downward knife hand chop, and Sub-Zero saw his chance to finish it. Sub-Zero gathered all of his remaining energy and unleashed an immense ice ball, freezing Noob solid. The thing that had been his older brother now stood trapped in ice. Sub-Zero stepped up to the frozen Wraith, grabbing the head, and with a hard tug ripped off of the structure. Blood bits flew everywhere in small ice bits, rather than liquid form. He then stepped back some as he then slid backward on his ice to give him room to perform his fatality. His right hand held the frozen Wraith's head for a moment, then flew forward. Okay. The T in then does not need to be capitalized, seeing it's continuing the fragment from the last paragraph. Hence the ... Let's continue. The Wraith's head sailed towards the ice-covered statue. Upon connection, it completely shattered. Pieces flew everywhere, decorating the ground with glittering crystals that shone with a dull black light or a dull red from parts of the dark corpse still encased inside them. The sorrow still hung heavily in Sub-Zero's heart, but now it was mixed with a feeling of relief. The happy idea that his brother had finally found peace in death. Well, his death didn't really seem that peaceful, but whatever. Just then, peering down the side of the pyramid, Sub-Zero was certain he saw blurs of green and red surrounded a yellow and red figure. Suddenly, the red figure popped his elbow into the yellow figure's chin and caused him to stagger back. At this point, Sub-Zero had identified the figure as Cyrax and Sector. The red cyborg moved in for another attack but stopped. Sector dropped to his knees and collapsed forward, blood like oil dilating around the head. A tired-looking Serena had thrown her knife into the back of the cyborg's head. Sub-Zero just watched with a face mixed with surprise and sadness. Sub-Zero almost saw Serena meet up with Cyrax, but he felt great heat on his back. The dragon medallion began to glow as it released its cold to protect Sub-Zero. He spun around instinctively up at the top of the pyramid, fearing what might be seen. There were 2 characters that stood at the top, giant swords in their hands, and were facing the flame. After further inspection, Sub-Zero discovered that one of the figures being was Taven, the one whom had met when Noob and Smoke invaded the Linkuo Temple. But what was he doing there? Then it hit him. Taven had mentioned something about saving the realms, so this must have been the fight which he wanted the armor for, Sub-Zero thought. Just then, a gigantic roar was heard, and the surrounding area began to shake more and more violently as Sub-Zero tried to identify the second character, but he never got his chance as the figure suddenly glowed a pink color and exploded inaudibly in various directions as small as 10 teledrills of energy. One of these worms coated itself around Taven, as if to consume him. Sub-Zero had no time for further thought as one of the worms of energy was suddenly heading straight for him. Taking this as an attack, he tried to form another sword, but the worm was already to him. The energy coated itself around his body just as it had done to Taven. Expecting to feel some kind of pain, he felt none. Looking over at Cyrax, Serena, Scorpion, and the unconscious body of Smoke, they were coated with the pink energy as well. What's going on? I feel no form of pain. What is this energy? As was Sub-Zero's last thoughts before the explosion. As if the forces of 1,000 Lin-Q catapult impacts occurring simultaneously. Such a force was so great, Sub-Zero flew off the pyramid. Looking all around him, he could faintly catch glimpses of other combatants, whose fate, or soon-to-be fate, was unknown to him as they flew through the air as well. Sub-Zero looked all around fearfully for something that could just help him break his fall. When he caught sight of the body of a black cyborg, he reached out for the unconscious Smoke's seemingly outstretched arm. Just a little further, yes. Sub-Zero pulled himself closer and located a button on Smoke's utility belt. Not wasting a second, he pressed it, and a few seconds later felt the jerk of gravity as a parachute popped out. Viewing the ground below, Sub-Zero had an unimpeded view of the shock wave as it spread across the Endenian landscape as far as he could see. It appeared that this orange shock wave had its effect on living creatures only, as not a single solid structure within the crater appeared to be scratched any. Each unfortunate unprotected combatant was sent violently ablaze. For example, he caught sight of Naga, the Dragon King himself, being sent into flames. Ironic for that being with a notoriety. Okay, you don't need A in that sentence. For doing just that. The shockwave appeared to whatever, as it spread out away from the pyramid, thus allowing some other combatants to remain safe. Some of those other combatants, like Datara, rather than resuming fighting, just retreated for an exit from the crater. Sub-Zero looked all around to view a few combatants who had survived the shockwave and their fall from the pyramid. He identified Jax, but had a metallic stump for a left arm. Okay, why do you have the word button there? Sonya appeared to be still standing, was administering some field dressings to the blind swordman Kenshi. A few moments later, he touched down on a loosely cracked ground near the still-standing Ermac, Sindel, and Katana. Sub-Zero laid the unconscious body of the cyborg on the ground. "My queen," he said, "are you all right?" "Just a few cuts and bruises, but we all will survive," she replied. Looking at the princess and the fusion being, Sub-Zero could see that she wasn't mistaken. Katana and Ermac both looked alive and well. "But never in my years studying Endenian magic has something like this ever been experienced," Sindel continued, and indicated to her body. The pinkish glow was clearly still present to them all, even the body of Smoke. It was then that Cyrax, Scorpion, and Serena joined the party, when suddenly the energy that coated their bodies dissipated, as if to signal the worst was over. "What sort of sorcery could have caused this?" Serena questioned aloud. "The defeat of Blaze." All turned around to see Taven walking towards them. He was wearing his armor, the very one that Sub-Zero had seen before. "Taven?" Sub-Zero said. Should say asked. "Yes, Sub-Zero." He spoke. "Finally, my quest has reached an end, and it looks like this was its does not need an apostrophe S result." "What do you mean?" Sub-Zero asked. This whole quest has been designed by my parents of Dagon, and I to resolve stability within the realms. Taven replied, the power released by Blaze's death was supposed to pass through my armor and dissipate into every combatant within this crater, resulting with death or power annulment. At that last sentence, all warriors had shocking thoughts running through their minds. If I had known that would come to this, I would have finished our fight without hesitation, Sub-Zero thought. You should all be thankful, Taven continued, which put a temporary damper to the other's violent thoughts. If Zeron had not been there to sacrifice himself, you would have been destroyed in the shockwave of Blaze's death. So that pink energy around us was energy of the Elder God? Sindel asked. Exactly, Taven replied. My mother, Dahlia, had sent him forth to save the combatants who were undeserving of death. A noble sacrifice indeed, said a voice. All turned to face Raiden before them, but one distinct characteristic of him was his eyes. Okay, replace the comma with a semicolon, please. They were no longer glowing their violent red color, but were now their original white color. Raiden, Taven exclaimed, you will pay your treachery with your life. Halos of fire formed around Taven's fist, but Raiden held out his hand and stopped him. No, Taven, I am no longer the enemy. You defeating me in combat managed to cleanse me of my corruption, and I thank you for that. Taven lowered his fist when he heard this. Raiden spoke again. And now that you have completed your quest, what will you do now as a full god? My first task. Taven started, and pulled out Shao Kahn's decapitated head with the helmet still on it. All the destruction and suffering Shao Kahn has caused shall end on this day. With that, Taven gripped the head's spinal cord stump and began to tug. Sub-Zero could not believe it. The great Shao Kahn, the conqueror, was finally dead. And now all was left of him was his head. He saw a look of strain about Taven's face as he attempted to remove the head from the helmet. Suddenly, Taven separated the head from the helmet, and a great soul-rendering howl could be heard. Colorful spectral lights burst from inside of Shao Kahn's helmet and flashed outward. Sub-Zero and the others witnessed one of these spectral lights shot into the body of Ermac, and the fusion being was left screaming as the energy began to reform him. There was a flash of light so bright even Raiden had to shield his eyes. A few minutes... Minutes does not need an apostrophe. It never has and it never will, because minutes do not own anything. So get rid of the apostrophe. Later, the Lin Q warrior could open his eyes again and was amazed at what he saw. There was no longer a single Ermac, but at least 1,000 surrounding them. Each one had a specific characteristic about them that Sub-Zero remembered as Outworld's fallen warriors from the past. Can it be? One of the Ermacs asked. It is, exclaimed another. The Ermacs let out a cheer that shook the Endarian crater. Where am I? Sub-Zero heard someone. The uproar instantly died down as the Ermacs turned to the familiar voice. The figure stood a few feet from Sindel and Katana was a man who appeared to be in his 50s in Earth Realm years. He had a brown mustache and a goatee to match, with short hair on his head. His attire was a battle remnant of Endurian knight, but it looked too royal to be on just any one of them. No, this armor was clearly one made for Gerard. Sindel uttered as she and her daughter captured him in a deep embrace. At the sight of the old king before them, the other combatants, including Taven and the Ermacs, knelt before Gerard. Sub-Zero himself was humbled to see King Gerard alive again. Sindel, Katana, Gerard said as he released his embrace. I can't believe it's you again. After a moment, they pulled out their embrace, and the late king continued good looks at the family he had lost so long ago. Okay, that could have been reworded. My, he said, looking at Katana. How my little girl has grown up. It seemed only yesterday that I last saw Sindel hold you in her arms. Now you're a young woman, but do tell, how long has it really been? From what I can remember, Katana recalled, I have not seen you my whole life, more than 5,000 years. I had no doubt in my mind that you would live long and at least manageable life with your mother around. I think they spelled manageable wrong. He said as he kissed her forehead. Can anyone guess what the missing letter is? Katana then blushed and Gerard turned to view the surrounding area. The Edenian crater of the Southlands and the ancient pyramid constructed by Argus himself. Tell me, has that prophecy come full circle yet? He asked his queen. Yes, Gerard, the final battle, as prophesied by the sorceress Dahlia, has taken place. The death of the Firespawn is 2 words, not 1, Blaze has caused this. Sindel replied. So this is the man who slayed the Firespawn. Looking at Taven, then back to Sindel. Who is looking at Taven and back to Sindel? The king? Put that in there, please, and thank you. At Sindel's nod, Gerard turned to Taven and ushered him to rise. Thank you for saving us, Taven, he said to him. By destroying Blaze, you have prevented Armageddon from destroying us and all the realms. Many lives have been spared due to your efforts, but I'm afraid you are not done yet. You must leave these combatants into battle with Shinnok, and let me worry about the reconstruction of Edenia. Consider me and my family as your allies in the days to follow. Shinnok is still alive? Taven questioned. How is that possible? Shinnok is a worthy opponent, Raiden replied. But his kind rarely exposes themselves to direct danger, especially when they know their plans do not go as they anticipate. Nevertheless, you have our word, Taven. We will help you make Shinnok fall once again. But for now, we must further prepare ourselves back in Earthrealm. I have no doubt in my mind that you will succeed, Gerard said. Shinnok may still, at this point, be the root of all deception, wars, and evil. We can all still overthrow him and maybe finish him off for good. My king, one of the Ermacs, stepped forward and said, We warriors of Outworld's past are quite familiar with the threat of Shinnok would impose. That is why we would all devote ourselves to joining your ranks in your Edenian army and attempt to defeat him. It is good knowledge that you are aware of the situation, Gerard deduced to the Ermac. But knowing wins only half this battle. Still, very powerful warriors standing before me with clear expression of fighting for a good cause. Very well. You are welcome to join in the ranks of my new Edenian army. Simply rejoin me at my old castle and the process for knighting will begin. Thank you, King Gerard, the Ermac humbly said. I can guarantee that you will not live to regret your decision. We will fight until the threat is permanently removed. Oh my god, how much longer is this? With all that being said, the Ermacs and the Edenian family began to march off to the pyramid in honor fallen comrades. Raiden stretched forth his hand, and a portal to Earthrealm emerged out of lightning. He, Cyrax, and Serena first stepped through, followed by others. Well, Sub-Zero, this is where we must part for now, Scorpion said. No intentions of following or killing me, I assume, Sub-Zero asked. None for now, Scorpion replied. Besides, I believe you still recall my vow I made some time back. Still fresh on my mind, even from being so long ago, Sub-Zero said. But I can't help but wonder, what will you do now that Quan Chi is dead? It is indeed an unknown thought, even at this point, Scorpion summed up. I guess part of my honest side would feel like joining you in a new fight against Shinnok. He is the reason that Quan Chi came into existence. Existence is spelled with an E, not an A. Let's continue. And gods only know what would happen if another equally evil sorcerer were to be created. We can all hope that your honest intentions prevail over your natural hellspawn instincts, Sub-Zero jokingly said. Scorpion apparently chose not to comment. Then the cryomancer stuck his hand out, and the Hellspawn took it into a handshake. "Until we should meet again, Scorpion," Sub-Zero said, and the Hellspawn vanished into flames. And a lot must be done until then, he thought, as he picked up the unconscious, you're missing an S in that word, body of Smoke and entered the portal, provided that Sonya and the OIA can regain Smoke's soul. I guess Smoke used to be a good guy. Nether realm. Shinnok had barely escaped with his life before Blaze's shockwave had gotten to him. He now sat upon his throne in his spire, deep in thought. I should have anticipated Dagon's failure, he thought. Now all my plans must be revised. Suddenly, Shinnok recalled something very important. Amidst the chaos of combat, Shinnok had stumbled upon the bloody, decapitated body of his vanguard, Quan Chi. Not even my servant was able to survive, he thought. What a pity. It was right then that Shinnok had noticed a kamidogu around Quan Chi's waist. He picked it up in his hand and observed it. His evil power flowed into it, and the center of the medallion began to glow. Finally, I have retrieved what is rightfully mine. I still should have known that Quan Chi had the original and had sent me a fake one in its place so many years ago. Shinnok pulled out the retrieved kamidogu and eyed it. It began to glow more immensely the more he held it. He smiled his evil smile, knowing that his new plans were soon to succeed. Well, that could have been a lot shorter, or at least that could have been broken up into chapters. Frankly, if a one-shot is over 3,000 words, it should be broken up into chapters. Because, that would just make the story flow a hell of a lot better. Was this fanfic bad, though? Well, no, it wasn't bad. I mean, I probably would have understood more of it if I was more familiar with Mortal Kombat, but unfortunately a lot of this went over my head, and if I did pronounce things wrong, please forgive me. Well, I'm the FanFic Critic. I read it, you listen, and I have nothing to say.